And so if you ask me, will today's ceasefire hold for a while? It could, but it's not a peace plan. Let's have no confusion about that. I never really thought this had much to do with Hamas. That was a convenient bumper sticker for a genocidal maniac.
Jeffrey Sachs just revealed why Trump's Gaza plan is no peace plan at all. And in this clip, he gets into what he thinks the prospects are for this ceasefire agreement to lead to a lasting peace between the Israelis and Palestinians, what it means for U.S. politics, and actually the redeemable things he sees in this plan. So let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
What is your take on the Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Tony Blair Gaza plan?
Well, apparently there will be a ceasefire that could be a sustained ceasefire. And that is very good news. Maybe the fighting is going to stop. Israel has murdered 67,000 people since it attacked Gaza on October 8, following the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023. 67,000 people is a lot. It has starved hundreds of thousands of people as well, and many children dying just on a daily basis right now because of starvation. So maybe this will end with a ceasefire, an exchange of hostages held in Gaza by Hamas and other militia forces, and hostages held by Israel in much larger numbers, hostages seized by Israel in Gaza and other Palestinians as well.
Yeah, generally agree with this. What can be said other than defending Israel in 2025 will age more poorly than defending Fauci in 2022? There's no, wrong statement in that, I think. This is just causing a lot of the original supporters of this to peel away, especially on the American right. You're seeing it more and more. They've just lost the argument. And when Matt Walsh announces that on his show on the Daily Wire, I mean, that's pretty telling. The guy's working for Ben Shapiro, but happened to tell the truth about this. So that's where we're at, and I actually think that Jeffrey Sachs is underestimating the deaths a bit by saying 67,000. Of course, it's hard to know, but I think those figures actually come from Israel, and it seems closer to 100,000 or more. And this gets kind of tricky and murky because there's probably over 100,000 people missing and not accounted for. Many of those people can be presumed dead, but either way, this is absolutely indefensible. There's no way around it, so if this leads to a lasting, at least ending of hostilities between the Palestinians and Israelis, that's a good thing. Do I think this will be a lasting peace? No, I don't. And Israel has a long track record for violating ceasefires.
Maybe up to 2,000 will be released in this deal. This is said to be the end of the fighting. Maybe Israel has exhausted itself. It certainly has exhausted the patience of the world with this mass genocidal bloodletting that it has been on for the last 2 years. Now, all the rest of the so-called peace plan is not agreed. It will never be agreed. We're only after the fighting stops going to enter into the real politics of this. And the politics are very straightforward. Israel, with U.S. backing, has rejected a state of Palestine for decades. The world community overwhelmingly, for decades, has called for a state of Palestine. The UN General Assembly, by massive votes, with more than 90% of the world community in countries voting yes, have called for a state of Palestine on multiple occasions in recent years, including just a couple of weeks ago. this plan, so-called, isn't really a plan beyond what has happened today or apparently will happen in these hours. There's a lot of gobbledygook, but there's no resolution of the core political issues.
Yeah, that's the truth. And the core political issue is a Palestinian state. Look, I'm not a globalist or internationalist leaning person that cares about global consensus on a Palestinian state, but I get to supporting it, I guess, in contradiction to what's happening now, which is a genocide being bankrolled by the U.S. as a preferred alternative to what's going on now. And I would do that even if 0 other states in the world did that. But he's right totally about what this agreement, what this deal, what this Trump Gaza plan is. And we can see that from the points. If you look at point 20, this is the closest thing that gets into the territory of discussing a Palestinian state. And of course it doesn't. And Netanyahu boasted about that. And he said there'll never be a Palestinian state in the UN. But it's just this ambiguous statement that has, an agreed upon political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence, saying nothing about a Palestinian state, which is a clear solution. And I think that's way less utopian personally than having one state with equal rights for all, which, some others promote, like Max Blumenthal, who I respect immensely, by the way. But the idea that Israel is going to be more likely to open the door to that when Palestinians can, have electoral power and leverage over them and lead to a Palestinian prime minister and packing the Knesset with Palestinians, I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't even think that's remotely as realistic as a Palestinian state. But he's right. Since the 2002 Beirut summit, it's been on the table. A 10-point basic plan said, hey, the Arab states got together. They're going to normalize relations with Israel in general and bring about a Palestinian state. It really is that simple. Seems like an afterthought. Seems like totally off the table from the U.S. and Israel. The U.S. does use its veto power in the UN Security Council to prevent it from happening. But I do think that's a superior political alternative to the political status quo right now, which is support Israel in all ways whatsoever. Bomb whoever they're bombing. Be joined at the hip. Even compromise U.S. interests to do that like they did in Iran. And bankroll the genocide.
There's a lot of spin and fluff and bluff, and Donald Trump to be king of the Palestinians and lots of weird things that aren't going to happen. The question is, will there be a state of Palestine? Will the United States try, as it has for decades, to divide, suppress, scare, bribe, twist arms of the Arab world to Israel's will? Or will the Arab world finally, after basically a century of abuse by the British and the Americans, starting at the end of World War I until today, will the Arab world finally stand up and say, enough is enough? We're not going to be bullied, bribed, twisted again with yet another defeat of basic political rights of the Palestinian people. So,
yeah, I don't know if that'll ever happen, especially with the U.S. paying off Jordan and Egypt as part of the Camp David Accords in 1979. As a result of that, I think Egypt received something like $1.3 billion a year from the U.S. just so that they don't go to war with Israel. And Jordan receives a lot of money annually as well. I don't know that they can say no to bribes when they've been accepting it so long. And that really is support for Israel, because you're sending money to these countries that are adjacent to Israel or in the region of Israel just to not to go to war with Israel. It's de facto aid for Israel. And that doesn't even appear in the calculations that we talk about when we talk about aid for Israel, which is off the charts ridiculous right now, with $32 billion sent to their coffers, to Netanyahu, the vile war criminal's coffers, since October 7th.
All of that is to come. Today, it appears maybe there's enough exhaustion, enough disgust, enough global pressure that Israel's genocide is ending today. At least we have to hope so.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's goal, of course, has been the eradication of the Palestinian people from Gaza. Hamas's goal has been to survive and stay relevant. Many of your colleagues on this show today who share your and my and our viewers' views of the genocide have said this is a setback for Netanyahu. Hamas survives, something he vowed would never happen. Do you view that this way? Can you see it through that lens, Professor Sachs?
I never really thought this had much to do with Hamas. That was a convenient bumper sticker for a genocidal maniac driving his military through Gaza on a mass murder campaign. Hamas is one of the militant groups that has been fighting Israel's occupation of Palestine. It's one of them. In the context of a state of Palestine really being created alongside Israel on the borders of the 4th of June, 1967, that is, with a real state of Palestine being created according to international law and the will of the international community, Hamas would not be an obstacle to peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And Benjamin Netanyahu, as we know, supported Hamas financially through Qatar as an intermediary. You know, the country they always accuse us, critics of Israel, of being paid for. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu used Qatar more than I use Qatar for my viewpoints or to source my viewpoints in. So that's where we're at. And yeah, the neocons and the Zionists are desperate to make October 7th the beginning of history, as if that's when this conflict began. And make no doubt that was Hamas's, largest scale attack on Israelis. But, some of the numbers of the casualties is something like 1,200 people were inflated because many of those people were killed by the IDF. The IDF used what was known as the Hannibal Directive, according to several whistleblowers that were hostages that were released, having IDF forces shoot at innocents and kill them such that they couldn't be taken hostage. Also, many of the people died, perhaps hundreds, were Israeli regular soldiers. So this was a big attack, but make no mistake, this has been a catastrophe since the 1967 occupation and acquisition of the territories outside of Green Line Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza from Egypt, taking them in the war, taking the Golan Heights, and really are stemmed all the way back from 1947 and 1948, when a wave of terrorism, which actually unfolded earlier in the 40s, unfolded and pushed these people out. It was a grand robbery of their land under the UN mandate supported by the British and the US. This was the Nakba.
It's not an independent actor. It gets funded and it gets armed by those who are calling for a state of Palestine. If a state of Palestine is actually achieved, Hamas does not play any central role in this drama. So I think all of this incessant focus on Hamas has been kind of a talisman or a way for Israel to talk itself into a flagrant, open genocide of the Palestinian people.
Yeah, that's right, and they make no bones about it. They know their stranglehold on U.S. politics and the demographic shift of younger people leaving the Israel First cause is happening quicker and quicker, and it's only being compounded by the bloodshed and atrocities that they commit in Gaza and the bombings they do of 7 of their neighbors since October 7th. This can't be just swept under the rug. They know this is changing right now. AIPAC does have power over our government, does have power over our president. Miriam Adelson certainly does, but that doesn't seem to be true forever. Barring some significant change in the trajectory we're witnessing, maybe in 10 years, it just simply won't. So they're acting so desperately and erratically now to do this in pursuit of the greater Israel dream of expanding Israel's borders, much like Hitler wanted to expand the borders of Germany by taking the Lebensraum. That's how they view the greater Israel project.
I think that there's a reasonable chance that this can go into effect. Then there is the rest about the future. I think there's no chance that the rest can go into effect, because the rest of this 20-point plan is a bunch of nonsense, actually. It's not a plan at all. It's not been agreed by anybody. There's only one way to have peace. If you want it right now, if you want peace, it is what the overwhelming majority of the international world, the international community has said, and the International Court of Justice and decades of international law, and that is a state of Palestine alongside a state of Israel. By the way, many people say, why should there ever be that? There should be one state, because Israel, has proven itself incapable of being a civil society and so forth. All I would say is, if people believe in that, perfectly understandable that people would have that view. I don't object to it in some principle way. I just don't think that it is at all what can bring peace.
Yeah, I generally agree. I just think it's more utopian that the Israelis would accept that, easier than they would a two-state solution, with Palestinians casting their vote and making electoral changes of their government, their society. I just don't see that at all. So, I agree with them.
There are 8 million Israeli Jews right now. There are 8 million Palestinian Arabs. They each need their place to live, and trust and living together. God help us, it should come, but it's going to take years or decades. But right now, we need peace, and we need Israel to end its slaughter and its repression of the Palestinian people. And the one thing that is immediately at hand is the fact, as I've said, that more than 90% of the world is in countries that say 2 states, do it now. We know the borders. That's international law. That could happen tomorrow.
That actually doesn't matter, though, because that, if anything, reveals the flaws in this globalist institution that is the UN, where the U.S. just has veto power in the National Security Committee, where they can just use their veto power to shut down any attempt to create a Palestinian state, despite, 190 countries that are for it. It doesn't actually matter. And this is what confuses me about Sachs, despite how much I love him. And I love him so much. I love him so much that if I were president, he would be my Secretary of State. I truly mean that. I agree with him on foreign policy more than basically anyone else that I host on this program. Maybe, Dave Smith. But at the same time, the international consensus model just... If something's moral, it doesn't matter how many countries are for or against it. It doesn't matter. You can use that as a backing point, as a promotional tool, I suppose. But would we say, hey, if 190 countries hypothetically supported slavery, then maybe, we should have slavery in a country where that was a possibility to enact it again or revive it? No, of course not. So this globalist model that allows the U.S. to have such leverage and shut these things down seem to reveal the shortcomings of an institution like this anyway, in addition to the fact that, hey, all their resolutions had to be enforced by their member states, and the member states don't have to enforce them anyways if they don't want. But that's me on my soapbox there.
If Trump would change American policy, the big if the United States could have its own foreign policy, that's what we're really waiting for. And so if you ask me, will today's ceasefire hold for a while? It could, but it's not a peace plan. Let's have no confusion about that.
Got it.
And the next steps depend on real politics and depend on the world will and international law prevailing over the United States being in the hands of the Zionist lobby. This is what it's going to take to bring peace.
Right.
Well, then I don't know that there'll ever be peace, because I don't think that international opinion is going to prevail over the U.S. and the National Security Council, where the U.S. has veto power. But I do generally agree with Sachs for sure. This plan isn't a peace plan, and it divests basically all the power in Israel and the United States in this new ISF board that's referenced in the 20 points of the plan. That's to be headed by Donald Trump, for economic redevelopment and the heads of state of other countries to be announced, including Tony Blair. Tony Blair, he's the one that wants to redevelop Gaza along with Jared Kushner, make it the Gaza Riviera, and just exploit this as neo-colonialism. Like, that's what literally this is. If you read this first point, it says that, you know, Gaza is going to be governed under a temporary transitional government that's an apolitical Palestinian committee populated by Palestinians, and that looks great. And then, nope, this institution has oversight for it. It's the Donald Trump, corrupt Jared Kushner, Tony Blair body that has power to line their pockets for this. It's not about peace. It's about exploitation at the hands of this corrupt government handout, not competition, not allowing anyone that wants to develop there without any hampering, just granting it to this subsection of people that are close to Trump. But that's not it. I mean, also under this agreement, Israel and the United States basically have plenary power over the question of whether they've decided that Hamas has actually laid down their arms, has actually decided to have peace. If one Hamas soldier still has their arms, they can just use that as a pretense, as an excuse to continue the genocide. It's almost as if like Gaza has to be Belgium, and until Gaza is Belgium, then we will not have peace. We'll have the excuse that's brought about by Netanyahu to continue the ethnic cleansing campaign. That's my biggest fear. And Israel is known to violate ceasefires. They've done it more than 1,000 times in the Gaza crisis alone. If you don't believe me, you can Google that, look into that, but that is true too. So I'm with Sachs in that I don't think this peace plan is going to last. Actually, I said that wrong. I agree with him that this isn't a peace plan. I'm glad that there's a ceasefire. At some point, everyone that opposes Israel and opposes the killings, the slaughter, the starvation should celebrate the end of hostilities, even if it's temporary, for sure. I'll give it that. I just am too cynical to believe that this will last. I do think this will be renewed. Trump can say all he wants. I do think Trump wants to get away from this part of it. You know, the black eye that's been caused to the U.S. for bankrolling this genocide and doing nothing without any leverage to try to get Netanyahu to stop it. I do think Trump wants that off his record, especially as this issue just completely drives a schism between his base, much like the Epstein scandal did, much like the war with Iran did, especially. His base was very split on that too and how to handle that. This is really going to detract from his potential to have his guys win in 2026 and even maybe to beat the Democrats in 2028. It will compromise the rest of his agenda, even though he doesn't have another personal election. So we'll have to see how this pans out. I'm praying for peace, still seeking the truth, still trying to expose the truth about this stuff, talk about the plan, what's being said about it, what are the things hidden behind the veil of it. Tried to bring that out today, but I do want to hear from you. Is Jeffrey Sachs right about this? Is this a peace plan, or is this just a plan designed, to be convenient for a while that won't lead for an everlasting peace? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Judge Napolitano. Thank you for this interview of Sachs. And if you like this video and my commentary, please consider becoming a YouTube member if you click the join button below. You can help support the channel, and I'll really appreciate that if you do that. And in return for that, though, if you go to that length to support me, I will give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on my channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.